Welcome to In the Black, the podcast that shines a light on resilience, transformation, and the power of reinvention. I'm Araceli, and each week, my co-host Shannon and I sit down with incredible women who face some of life's hardest challenges, from personal setbacks to societal obstacles, and have emerged on the other side stronger, driven, and ready to make a difference.
On In the Black, we celebrate these stories of strength and success, diving deep into the journeys of women who turned pain into purpose, adversity into action, and now dedicate themselves to making the world a better place in their own way. They're here to inspire, share hard-earned wisdom, and remind us all, no matter how dark things may seem, life is cyclical and dawn is coming. So whether you're looking for inspiration, motivation, or just a reminder that change is always possible, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to In the Black.
Today's guest is a true force of transformation. With over 17 years of entrepreneurial experience, she's an award-winning high-performance, trauma-informed coach, a TEDx speaker, and the founder of Crown Yourself and Communication Queens. She's also the #1 best-selling author of Make Every Podcast Want You, How to Become So Radically Interesting You'll Barely Keep from Interviewing Yourself. But behind the accolades is a powerful story of resilience, radical ownership, and turning pain into purpose, from surviving bulimia, abuse, and deep loss to being bought out of her e-commerce company and navigating motherhood through immense grief and uncertainty. She's emerged not only successful, but sovereign. Her approach blends storytelling with strategy, sparkle with substance, and practical tools with deep inner healing. She's here to empower you to rewrite your story, speak your truth, and own your crown. Please welcome to the show, Kimberly Spencer.
Thank you for having me, Araceli and Shannon. It is an honor to be on In the Black.
We are so excited to have you.
Yes, so much for joining us.
So going through your story a little bit, if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about where you are, who you are, and just kind of go through what you're doing with your life right now.
So where I am physically is outside of Austin, Texas, where like getting here though was quite the journey over the past 3 years. I am the mother of 3 beautiful children, ages 7, 3, and 3 months. And we running 2 businesses simultaneously with my husband. On our beautiful homestead, I like to joke that my husband is like our farm to table private chef. So, because when we lived in Australia back in 2020 and 2021, we were those Americans who got stuck abroad, and he ended up going to chef school while my business was growing and thriving. And so that was a huge transition over the course of the past 5 years. We moved 5 times, twice in California, and then moved to Australia unexpectedly. We left for 3 weeks, ended up staying for 2 years, had a baby over there, brought back a souvenir. And, but while in Australia, there was, it was always our dream to live abroad. And so we ended up staying there because we're like, how long can this last? It's 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? Like that was the what was being said at the time. And we had a 3-month visa. So we thought, okay, well, we have a 3-month visa. It's always been our dream to live abroad. My business was doing very well. So I said, I can support us if your industry shuts down. His industry did shut down because he's a voice actor. And we ended up living over there for 2 years. And in that second year that we were there, I lost 5 family members, including my father, who I had a very complex relationship with growing up, and had a baby, started a second business, and then moved to from Australia back to California to wrap up my dad's estate and my other family members. And then we moved my mom with us to Texas. And so the past 4 years have been like, and then just recently had another baby. So the past 4 years have been a bit of a blur. And I feel like I've come out of my grief coma, quite frankly, because there was just so much rapid transformation happening, and doing it while navigating being a parent, while raising kid to be a functioning human, while growing businesses, while serving and supporting clients. It was a lot of, I call it my initiation into this next level of life, where I'm like, the responsibility that I have now, as a leader and as the queen of my household, as the queen of the businesses right now, that responsibility would have crushed me 5 years ago. But that initiation period really trained me to have a level of emotional resilience that I'd never had before. But it came with ownership. It came with like radical ownership and really being able to navigate being with my feelings as to where I was. Because there was a lot that I overcame growing up, but then these past 5 years were probably the most intense season of my life.
I love that. Oh my goodness. So, Australia, I've always wanted to visit. And why did you move back?
Yeah. So we moved back because my mom, we lost my dad, her sister, and her mom within 1 year. And she was alone in a house, and I'm an only child. And I said, and we had our second son. And Australia, we weren't quite sure what was going to be going on. They had just opened the borders in a way, and waves of COVID were coming in, and we were like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if this, and I felt like we kind of had our completion. Um, and it just felt like it was time to move back. And we had tried to set the date so we could make it home before my aunt passed, because we weren't able to be there when my father passed away. And then she passed really unexpectedly and very fast from a turbo cancer. She, within 3 weeks she was gone. And then my grandma, my aunt, was her caretaker, so she passed right after that. That was just a very clear sign to me that I was like, it's time to go home. It's time to support my mom. It's time to shift and start the next phase of life. So it was, and like, leaving Australia was such a hard decision because we loved it over there. We were thriving over there. We lived by the beach for 2 years. It was gorgeous. Like, we had a very normal COVID experience aside from like the massive lockdown that everyone had. Like, we lived a very normal life. As long as you didn't leave the state, that's kind of how it was. If you left the state, there was like an 8,000 person waiting list to get back in. So as long as you didn't leave the state, you can stay in Queensland. And my son got to go to school there, and we had a beautiful life that we had built, like, from nothing and from knowing no one. But it just was time. Like, I just felt it was time. And I felt like my mom was also navigating, she owned a business with my dad in LA, and a buyout process through that. So I helped guide her through that. And then we also had 3 estates. And if you've ever dealt with death in your life and navigating what it's like for that shift in not only wealth but taxes and debt, and handling, last requests and wills and things, it is like adding another business to your business. And so my mom was basically juggling 4 businesses by herself, and I just felt like she needed the support, and she'd been a support for me for so long, I could not.
Yeah, that is a lot. You have been through so much adversity, and it sounds like, especially in the last 4 years, but it's been even more intense and layered than that, with bulimia and sexual abuse in the past, under earning, abusive relationships. So let's take it all the way back. What was the first moment that you realized that your story wasn't going to define your destiny?
That was definitely when I was 19 years old, because like, my first memory of my life entirely is being on the freeway with police lights, and my dad had tipped his truck because he was driving drunk, um, on the freeway, and he tipped his gigantic tree trimming truck. He and my mom owned a tree trimming business, and that was kind of set the tone for a lot of my life. Was that I was able to chaos was a very normal thing, and things that I thought were normal growing up, I realize now were not. Um, and it was just, there was a lack of boundaries. There was a lot of dysfunction. And one of the blessings that I had later on after my dad had passed was I realized what it's like when you lose a parent or a caregiver, who you had a complex relationship with. Like my dad and I had a lot of struggles. He was my abuser and he was also my greatest influence. And so there were, and when, in the times that his alcoholism and his abuse were the worst, was after he had lost his parents, who he had a complex relationship, who he was abused by. So realizing that it's a cycle, and that at the time his only tool was alcohol. I have spent the past decade, if not 2 decades, equipping myself with tools like exercise, like health, like understanding what to eat, like navigating how I feel and understanding how to process emotions. I didn't know these things when I was growing up. I just knew reaction. I knew reactivity. That was my norm. That was my normal state, was to be in hyper reactivity and hyper vigilance. And so bulimia was my way of controlling what I felt was an uncontrollable household. And that was my form of addiction for 10 years. But I knew that it wasn't healthy for me. At 16, my mother chased me up the stairs after dinner, after I had told my parents that I was struggling with throwing up my food. And she chased me up the stairs and sat on me, tackled me to the ground because she knew that I was going to go to the bathroom to throw up. And she said, Kim, I'm not going to let you kill yourself. I love you too much. And that was really my breakthrough moment when I realized that bulimia was a slow form of suicide, that I didn't want to die, but I didn't know how to live in a way that felt good. And I didn't know how to live inside a body that felt safe. Because if you've experienced physical and sexual and emotional abuse, sometimes the body does not actually feel safe and you don't feel trusting in it. And I had to learn how to trust myself with food, how to trust my habits, how to trust my body to do what it's supposed to do. And so there was a level of congruence I had to learn how to develop. It didn't start really until I left my childhood home and started teaching Pilates. And when I started to teach Pilates, that was when, now in hindsight, I realized, oh my gosh, I was training how to regulate my nervous system, because I had so often lived in fight, flight, and freeze that I didn't know that there was a rest and digest. Like I didn't know there was another option. Um, I just, if you've ever lived with an addict, and it's hard because it's high. My dad was high functioning. He and my mom built a multi-million-dollar business while he was a drug addict, like, and an alcoholic. Like that's something that's incredibly impressive. And that experience of living with a high functioning alcoholic, no one knew. So my mom and I will watch videos now, like, and we loved my dad, but we loved him when he was sober. We loved him when he was not, but we just didn't like him and we didn't want to be around him. But that experience of, you know, almost kind of like, it's like, I can only assume, but I have a lot of family members in the military. My dad was in the military, not during my lifetime, but I can only assume that when you go into battle and you've been in a battle, there's a bonding moment. And that's kind of like how living with an addict feels, where there are things that, like, we'll watch a video. My mom and I, we got our home movies digitized, and we started watching some, and some we looked at each other like, I can't watch this. And it's not that anything bad was happening. It was not that anything like was off, but we knew that my dad was under the influence. He was off, and it made us super uncomfortable to sit with that again. And from the outside perspective, no one would know, and no one would feel uncomfortable. I mean, later on in life, my dad ended up being a YouTube star. And he had thousands of fans saying, oh my gosh, I wish he was my grandpa. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you may, because you think he's a funny, like, outgoing, like, guy, but I was like, you don't see his pain. Like, and the thing that I got to experience from such an early age was the beauty of living in a paradox, of seeing someone's behavior not match their potential. And that's why I have been obsessed with seeing people for their potential. And my dad was my greatest training ground. Like I am so grateful for my childhood and for everything that he taught me and everything that he didn't teach me, because it's allowed me to fully step into a role that now every skill set that I learned as a child, not the defensive ones, but those I now get to leverage and use in my coaching practice. Like I can notice behavior shifts in clients when they don't even themselves realize that they've had a shift.
I actually wrote a poem about that.
Did you
Um,
really?
yeah, because my dad ended up in prison for trying to kill my brothers, and but growing up that way, like I feel like those are my superpowers. If there is a mood shift, if there is any sort of shift in energy, I immediately know, and it allows me to read the people and to read the room. And yeah, so I totally get what you're saying, because I do think that growing up the way that I did has led to some of my best skills.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, being able to describe people and see that there is a story underneath the story of their words. Such a powerful skill set. I mean, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and it's like there's beauty from ashes.
absolutely.
Absolutely. And you're one of them. That is just so well spoken, and your storytelling is just so captivating. To follow up on that question, what helped you start rewriting that narrative internally?
First it was first it was Pilates. Like that was my first step. Like, well, first actually, I'll backtrack that. First it was getting rejected from every system that I had thought I was supposed to be a part of. I was a diehard musical theater nerd. Like you picture Rachel Berry in Glee, that was me. Uh, maybe slightly less annoying, um, but like of a character, I hope. But I was very dead set on having this career in Hollywood, in pursuing a career in musical theater. Like I loved musical theater. I've been singing when Wicked finally came out. I was like, I've been waiting 22 years for this movie. Like that was my dream. And I subsequently got rejected from every single college that I was like had set my heart on going to. Um, and I got accepted to one with a couple scholarships. And I realized when I was at this the summer before I was supposed to go off to college, I was at a singing camp, and my dad, through one of his clients, was like, I have this acting class for you. And I don't know what parent, other than the parent of an entrepreneur, like other than entrepreneur parents would do this. Like, but I went to this class and I was like, this is the class I need to be a part of, because it was in Meisner acting and it taught you how to feel. And normally they didn't accept kids that were 17 or under the age of 18, but they said, okay, well, we see your commitment and you're recommended, so we will let you in. And that was my first foray into personal development, because we got a packet when we enrolled, and it's just an acting class, but like James Franco went there and Ashley Judd went there and Sean S. And so I was so excited. I was like eager beaver, top A perfectionist student. Like I'm going to sit there with my notepad and I'm going to do it right. And I got this book that had like all the books to read, plays to read, and the number one, and I remember it was like blacked out in a box, and it said, this is the most important book you will ever read in your life. And I was like, Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I was like, what does that have to do with acting, with Hollywood, with anything? Like I wanted to be the female Clint Eastwood, mixed with like Stephen Sondheim. Um, and, and yet I'm like, what does habits have to do with this? And so I started reading it. And I remember this point in the book, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was like, you are in charge of your emotions. And I was like, what? I had never heard in any capacity that you could possibly be in charge of your emotions, that you had some sort of agency, because I lived in a household of reactivity. And I started to explore this. I was like, is that true? Like, do I actually have control? And I started studying and reading books like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and things that showed that yes, there is a gap between the stimulus you have in life and the response that you give. And just because you feel a feeling doesn't mean that the action has to match it. And that was a life changer of a moment. The class taught me how to feel again and how to access it. And I was called out for my BS acting in essence when I could, because I was so skilled at acting in all the wrong places. I was so skilled at acting like I was fine when I wasn't. I was so skilled at acting like everything was going to be okay when I felt like shit. And that class taught me how to actually feel in my body again. So pair that with, I was still struggling with bulimia. I realized I needed to leave my childhood home, as supportive as my parents were of my dreams, and that was like one of the best parts of my parents, was they have always been the cheerleaders of my dreams no matter what. So that was the paradox that I got to live in. At the same time, I was like, I need to have my own space. I found Pilates through a colleague of mine who was in acting as well. And she was like, I'll train you. And I was like, well, I don't know how to do the gym, can't run a mile to save my life. I knew I needed to exercise to stay fit because my agents were like, you need to, stay looking 18 to play younger. And I was like, well, I've always had boobs and a butt. Like, it's not going to go away. But I'm short and I'm small. And so they thought that I would fit these better roles. And I tried Pilates and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And within 30 days, I actually found that I love my body, didn't do any harm to it, and simultaneously dropped the jean size. I was like, there is something to this magic. And so I got certified as an instructor. Within a few months, I had gotten my first job freelancing at a Pilates studio. Within a year, I was the highest paid, most fully booked instructor there. And I moved out and I was on my own. And finally, I was in a space where I changed my environment. And that's one of the biggest assets that you can give yourself, is to change your environment. Because I was training 10 different people a day for 5 days a week, or 5 days a week, and then 4 hours on Saturday. That is 44 hours of being around different people with different belief systems, with different experiences of life. That's why I love going on podcasts, because every one of your listeners gets to have an experience and a new relationship with someone else on your show that you are bringing into their world to offer perspective shifts. Because what this does is it shakes the frame of what you believe is possible. And so I started seeing clients who had phenomenal marriages that weren't yelling, that weren't screaming at each other, that were like, that seemed to be relatively well put together. I got to train clients that were really wealthy. And I was like, whoa, how'd you do that? And I got to train clients that were really wealthy, but really unhappy. And I got to see, like, what's the difference in this behavior? I got to see clients who lived very busy lives, but felt no happiness at all and no purpose. And I got to see clients who lived very busy lives and were living on purpose. And I got to experience different belief systems. And so through that, that's what progressed my healing so much, as well as being really authentic with where I was. I could sell Pilates because I sold it to myself first, because I got to practice what I preach. And simultaneously, I didn't realize I was learning how to regulate my nervous system. So I didn't approach personal development really from the top down. Like, yeah, I got the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and some great books to got me started, but ultimately it was the body that saved me, and tapping in through understanding and building a trusting relationship again with my body was the biggest game changer.
That's fascinating. I know Araceli is always talking about how healing starts in the body, and I have, my journey has been completely the opposite. It was definitely reading and listening and reading and listening, and then finally trying to put it into practice. And so, very, very different dynamic. So I'm curious, one thing that you haven't really touched on, you mentioned being in abusive relationships. What were some of the signs that you overlooked, and what did it take for you to finally walk away?
Yeah, so I had a subsequent of uh 3 relationships kind of back to back, leading up into the culmination of me running off and getting married to a Navy man. The first one, I was so desperate to be loved. And I was very skilled at being a chameleon. So I could adapt myself. And that's a skill set of an addict child, is you understand how to adapt yourself. And like, we all have that ability, but it's really prevalent in with children of addicts. And so I could change myself to being the person that someone else wanted. And I could hide how smart I was. I could hide my ambitions. I could downplay certain aspects or upplay certain aspects in order to be more attractive to the person that I was in a relationship with. Um, the
That makes
first, the what?
that makes me think of the runaway bride.
That's what my mom called me. She totally called me the runaway bride. She's like, Kim, everyone wanted to marry you, but no one really knew you. And I said, yeah. And that was the thing. Like the first love that I ever had, who just, like, I didn't listen to my intuition and I just chose to ignore it. When I was like, there were certain things that he had said, certain lies that he had said, I later found later on. And I was like, and I remember those moments where I still made the choice. Oh, I'm still going to choose to be with you, even though like a month into my relationship, you suddenly accidentally happened to fall on another woman's lips. Like, like those moments of just recognizing, like, the intuition speaks, but I didn't trust my body and I didn't trust myself. And I was so conscious minded, that I thought, oh, let me reason. Let me put all the conscious reasons as to why this works. Oh, no, he's very attractive. Oh, yeah, I get it. That happens sometimes. Oh, let me just excuse until there were no excuses. And the other woman that he was in a relationship with called me and was like, just curious, are you still in a relationship with him? And I was like, yeah. She goes, he's told me that you were broken up for like 6 months. And that was when I fell to the floor shaking. And it was like, oh my gosh, first love of my life, first of many things, like, just, oh my gosh. And then, but I didn't see the pattern. And so I immediately jumped into another relationship. Well, this relationship was with another sociopath who ended up robbing my family of about $100,000. Straight from the home, like straight out of it. And yeah, that was a delight to to experience. And I say that totally facetiously, but chronic liar. And again, when I had those intuitive nudges of like, this isn't seeming right, this isn't seeming right, something's seeming off, and just not to call it, like, I just didn't call it out. And then I met my ex, and the beautiful thing about my ex was that he was honest, but to a fault. Um, and just we were very young, and so there was a lot of insecurity and a lot of emotional immaturity on both our parts. And I didn't, because of what I'd grown up experiencing, I thought shouting at each other is normal constantly. And when I told my mom that we were getting married, she was like, oh, oh, you are. I didn't tell her that we'd ran off and gotten married. Um, but to tap back into the body, I remember when he deployed and he was on the other side of the world. And not only were we yelling at each other from on the other side of the world across a phone, but then on top of it, I mentioned that there was an ambition of mine that I wanted to pursue. And he said, whoa, 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 wait. So you want to be a writer and a business owner and a mother and a wife, and you want to grow an online empire. And like, how do you plan on doing it all? And I was like, I was standing there and I felt the sun shine in from my bedroom window, and I was like, he does not know me, and that's nobody else's fault but mine. I have masked my ambitions. I have hid who I am from him. That is my fault. And fast forward a few months later, I was running my first marathon, and it was the LA Marathon. It was 2011 in this torrential downpour, like just the nightmare of marathons that 100 people got hypothermia from. Like, it was and for me, that was the external circumstance of what was going on inside. So I was loving it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make it. And that marathon, being in that space, I crossed the finish line, and it just so happens that our reception for the wedding that we had ran off an elope, but we had planned a wedding for after. That the place we were going to have our reception was 4 more blocks past the finish line. And I grabbed my medal, I kept running, I ran straight into the restaurant, and I canceled the reservations. And I said, no, this wedding is not happening. And then I told my ex, and it was really hard, and it was a really hard conversation. But that experience of realizing I had let myself settle for less than my list. And I had made a list when I was 16 years old of all of the qualities. It must have been in some like divinely inspired, like fit of brilliance, because like I look back and my husband now hits 49 out of 50, and the 50th was kind of null and void because his mother passed away, and it was to have a great relationship with my mother-in-law. So I was like, oh my gosh, like this, I needed to refer back to that list more often, because I looked at all of the past relationships and I was like, no, 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 no. And I would settle for less than what I desired. And it's so funny because now I've given so many clients that exercise, and I kid you not, they have manifested their dream loves, their dream clients, because they make the dang list. That's how we got our house too. Like we sat down, and since my mom was moving with us, we were like, okay, we're all going to sit down. We're all make our list. We made a list. We now have it framed in our hallway. We got everything on that list.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I just feel like we just went through a quick snippet of a Hallmark movie through the ex.
Yes.
I mean, I think it would have to take place in a small town. I don't think for it to be a Hallmark movie. I now live in a small town, but
LA was too big.
LA is too big for a Hallmark movie. It really is.
So let's go fast forward to your e-commerce company. So being bought out of your e-commerce company must have felt like both a loss and a pivot point. What did that season teach you about identity, business detachment, and starting over?
Mm, great question. Because what it taught me is that life has a way of repeating itself. And it's not new level, new devils. It's new level, and it's the same damn devil, just in a different dress. And that was my experience with this e-commerce company. I had so to give you the backstory, like I had written a screenplay. I had co-written it with a director. It got produced, it got distributed, got picked up by Lionsgate. Like I was at the premiere of this film starring Danny Trejo, and I'm like, oh my gosh, lifelong dream happened, age of 24. Why am I only 80% fulfilled? And I'd had my private Pilates practice, and I said, well, that doesn't fully fulfill me either. So like, what's this next thing? And that was when I was presented with an opportunity to come on board as a consultant for this new backstretching device that was coming onto the market. And I saw the product. I said, I can sell that. I know that as a Pilates instructor, that should be in every Pilates studio, period, across the country. And I saw the product, and I said, I don't just want to be a consultant, I want to be a partner. And so I came on board. I brought some investment capital, and I said, I want to be a partner. I became president, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm president of a company at 24. Like I felt super nerdy, super out of my depth. And I had to learn a lot from the School of Hard Knocks. And that also was an experience in those little energetic, intuitive moments of not the right path, not the right path. I remember the moment that I sat down with my business partner, and he said, well, if we're going to go into business together, I feel like we should know some things about each other. And we sat down, and he shared some things about himself. And I was like, orange flag, not red flag, not like blaring, but I was just like, And it wasn't anything super bad. It wasn't anything terrible or anything like that. It was just, intuitively, my intuition was like, not in alignment. Maybe pass on this. It seems like a great opportunity, but there could be something better. But I, again, was like, no, on paper, it's all accurate. And this could be, the next bajillion-dollar product and whatnot and all the things. So I went with it, and I kept on leaning in. And within 2 years of being president of this company, my business partner and I had gotten so far out of alignment. We just operated business very differently. He was very old school. He was also multiple decades older than me. And I normally work well with older people because my husband is 19 years older than me, but this just didn't work out. Like it was just a completely different set of values. And it's not that it's good or bad. It's not that my values were right or his were right or one of us was wrong. It's just they were different. And so we had different ways of operating and different thought patterns of how a business should be run. I grew up with entrepreneur parents, so small and scrappy is my game. I'm like, well, let's get sales going before we get like fancy business cards printed. Um, so there's just a different order of operations. And those 2 years, I learned so much. And when he decided that he wanted to buy me out, and he didn't really want to buy me out, he just wanted to kick me out at first, and then a buyout was inevitable. Like that experience really taught me that that those beliefs of deserving, those beliefs of what I think I'm worth, those beliefs of everything that I had feared in every other area of life was suddenly thrown in my face in the one area that I'd never doubted myself. And I had quite a hefty ego. So like it was a humbling experience. And while I didn't approach it from like, I know everything, I know it all, I was also very confident, borderlining on cocky, I would say, at the age of 27. And so in that space, I suddenly was presented with all of these beliefs and fears and doubts that by professional men, by the way, that suddenly I was too young, I was too inexperienced, I didn't have a degree, I didn't have a college education, all these things that had never stopped me, that I'd always seen them as an asset. But because they were being presented to me by professional men, I suddenly got very down on myself and started to doubt myself. And while I was bought out of that company, at the end of it, I felt like a deep breath of like, thank God it's done. And like, also, wow, I failed. I lost my business. And that was devastating for me. And I didn't really realize how much, but we signed the buyout agreement literally 3 weeks before I walked down the aisle to marry my now husband. And so, yeah, in the summer that everyone's supposed to be like trying on dresses and tasting cakes, I was like, negotiate with lawyers. It was a lot. And I didn't realize that I was stuck in a trauma response from that. And so when we were off on our honeymoon and I was talking with my husband about like what I wanted to do and what I do when I got back, I didn't knew it wasn't Pilates. I knew it wasn't really Hollywood. I knew I wanted to, I love business. I love entrepreneurship. I just didn't know how I wanted to do it. I was discussing with him and I leaped off the couch and I said, crown yourself. And he's like, what's that? And I said, it's the name of my company. We do like holistic success. And he's like, what do you mean you do like holistic success? What does that mean? I'm like, it's kind of like Marie Forleo. And that was the base amount of clarity that I had. That was it. And because that was the base amount of clarity that I had, and I was so scared of rejection, I allowed that fear of rejection to put me into a space of doubting every move that I make, fearing getting rejected again, fearing growing because I was scared that someone was going to take it away from me, even though I'm the sole owner of my own business. These belief systems, they stayed with me until I confronted them. And that's why I say like belief systems are cyclical. You will deal with them in one area, and until you uproot them at the root, they're going to come back in a different form. Like I was just hosting a coaching call today for our community, and this belief system of a recurring fear came up, and I said, and I turned it back on our community. I said, well, what are you fearing? Like you're going to help your clients and help people guide and navigate through their fears of whatever industry they're facing or whatever next task they're doing in their businesses or in their lives. But we got to flip that for yourself, because perception is projection. And so you got to look at yourself and say, what fears am I not actually facing? Because we attract that which we are. And that's what I kept attracting. I kept on attracting people into my life that would cause me to doubt myself. I kept attracting people into my life. And if it wasn't myself who was doubting myself and my ability to do X, Y, and Z, it was other people that would reflect that doubt back to me. And it wasn't until I stepped up and said no, which basically happened when I realized I was pregnant with my first son. And I was like, hell no. The person that I am, I know I can 100% change. I don't like who she is. I don't want this to be the mother of my son. I know I can be better. I have to be better for him. And so I immediately put $5,000 down on a credit card that I didn't have, like didn't put myself into $40,000 worth of debt. I was already 35 and put myself into 40,000 because found this program in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. I said, I know this is 100% a mindset problem. I know I can shift it. I know I have a 9-month deadline. And that's what I did.
That's amazing. I just went through NLP training, so
Yes!
I can relate to that very much so.
Yes.
That's amazing.
It's like magic of words. It's amazing.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love your journey so much. Um, so something we haven't really touched on much. You were in Australia and you lived through the loss of 3 family members and 2 friends.
Mhm.
And you're pregnant, you're isolated in Australia, you didn't really know anybody. What did that isolation and grief and navigating motherhood and new baby and all of that, what did that period of your life, what did that teach you? What lessons did you take away from that?
The community and family is where you build it. Like, we didn't know anybody initially, but I intentionally set out to build community in that space. So I made friends with entrepreneurs. I, as a virtual entrepreneur, we lived in a tourist town of the Gold Coast. And so because things were more open there, I would go down to the restaurants that had no one in them because tourist season, there was none. And I would go and I felt like almost an obligation as an entrepreneur to like support other entrepreneurs going through this where they were just had no business going. And I would talk to people and I made friends and we put our son in school. And I remember the moment I was pregnant, I was very close to giving birth. Um, and my son's teacher and even the principal, they hand me their personal cell phone number. They said, we know you're far away from your family. Here's our personal numbers. Call us anytime. If you need us to grab Declan to watch him, like we are more than happy to be there for you. And I was like, community is cultivated anywhere you go if you intentionally create it. Like you can build relationships wherever you're at if you just make that an intention, because we are naturally biologically wired to be relational beings. And that experience of being in Australia. So when we moved back to California, I knew we weren't going to be there for long. And that was where my hometown was. So I already knew people there. But then when we moved outside of Austin, I again was very conscious of the community that I was developing with friendships that I was forming here, because I said, well, this is our community. These are the people that are going to be raising my sons with, and now my daughter. Like we were going to be living here. So I wanted to really intentionally say, okay, well, we can build that community again. We can build community wherever we're at. And that's the powerful thing with travel is, and I think especially now that we're in such a virtual world, like my son has friends around the world that he can visit, that he can chat to on FaceTime, that he can just, play a game with over the iPad. And that's such a cool opportunity, but it has to be cultivated through relationships and through intentionally going out there and making that an intention. But when you do make that an intention, it's a game changer, because when you change your circle, as my friend Jamar Jones says, you change your life. And that circle can be changed. Like you can do that in isolation. You can do that. You can do that if you go out to another country and you choose to be an expat and live somewhere else. Go then build relationships with the coffee shop owners and the flower lady, and go out there and just get into the community and build those relationships, because they will serve you so much in just giving you the extra support that you need, because we are not meant to do this life alone.
Absolutely.
So, language is something you emphasize as creating our reality. Can
Mhm.
you give an example of how shifting your language radically shifted your results or mindset during one of those dark moments?
I think the biggest language is language of ownership. And when you shift that language to being at cause and not being at effect, everything changes, especially with money, especially with your body, especially with relationships. So, especially in every area. And we think, oh, well, money is at an effect. And I'll just use a money example because that's one of the most apparent ones right now with a lot of my clients. Is they think they're the effect of money. So their reactions are based on their bank balances. Their choices are based on um, their the level of self-worth that their bank balance dictates, the amount of money that they're bringing in, especially when you're in entrepreneurship. Like there's the people blasting all over the interwebs of how much money they're making. And then you're like, I don't feel like I'm making that much. And I don't feel like I'm measuring up. However, then you're putting yourself at the effect side of money, and you actually have no power on the effect side of any equation. I did this for years as a bulimic, where I put myself at the effect side of food. I was like, oh, and it's food's fault and it's the ice cream's fault. And I would always blame. And that's what we see on the effect side of any equation is when there is blame, then there is no ownership. And then you lose your creative power to create your own reality. When, however, we are very creative beings. And when we shift our language to one of ownership, of one of just one of choice, that literally changes the game. So, for example, of an eating example, when I just changed my language to I choose to have this piece of chocolate, not like I have to have this piece of chocolate, which is all have tos are like a compulsive and effect. I have to. Somebody else is forcing me to, this other entity, this being inside of me, I have to, versus I choose to. I'm choosing to have this piece of chocolate. I'm choosing to enjoy it. And then I'm choosing to let it to let it process through my body. You can also do the same with money. I'm choosing to spend this dollar in this area versus I have to pay the bills. I'm choosing to spend this money in this area. That shift in just the language suddenly puts you at cause. And when you're at cause, you can actually create change. One of the best conversations that I had was with a rental car guy in Australia because he was losing his business. Like he had multiple locations and he shut them all down. He was down to one location. And he was like, I have to close. I have to do this. And it was all have to. And I said, you have a skill set, and it's one of the greatest skill sets that you can ever master. I said, you have a skill set of influence. You have been able to successfully influence people to not only work for you, but to buy from you. And because you have that skill set of influence, you could go off and start an Etsy shop and people would buy. You could go off and start any other business in any other area and you could be successful because you have a skill set. So stop giving away your power to the current economic and world reality that's happening. Just because it's happening doesn't mean that that you haven't actually gained a skill set. You can never take away your own skill set. That's something that's intrinsic. I mean, maybe if you got like a brain injury, you might have to retrain it. But if ideally, that aside, that skill set is ingrained and it's learned through experience. And when you have that, then you can choose, okay, well, I'm no longer, I'm choosing to close down my business because it's not a smart decision to keep multiple rental locations when nobody's renting a car and nobody's traveling. So when you shift that language, suddenly you're more at cause, suddenly you're more in your power. And that's, you can say, okay, well, I'm consciously choosing to close multiple locations so that I can reinvest this money in another industry, in another business, in another area of my life. And that when you shift your language from just being at effect to being at choice, game changer.
Absolutely. I love that so much. I'm all about language and
Yeah.
choices, and I talk about it all the time. It does look like you built not one, but two mission-driven businesses while
Yeah.
healing, raising your family. What does your daily practice or the principles that you abide by um, that help you stay rooted in that vision and navigate all of the changes?
I mean, change is constant. So like the daily practices, I used to have a morning routine where I would just like wake up, workout and all that. And I've since began to just like, especially now that I have my daughter and she's my last child, I love a slow morning. And I love really being able to lean into just savoring the morning and having reverence and remembering that all of the external other things, the people, the people praise, I look at my kids' faces and I'm like, this is why. This is what matters. And this is the truth versus this is all this the hype and the stuff of things people say about all the things. That in and of itself, it is a practice of reverence. And so the basic principles that I practice, I mean, the habits shift, definitely love some movement, still have practice Pilates. I still have my reformer from my Fitness with Kim days of my Pilates studio. It's in our gym. Like still I was training for another marathon. Training for a marathon does put me into a different mindset. It puts me into a way more disciplined mindset. So after having my daughter and really enjoying those 3 months of just allowing myself to be in a softer space and just loving my body for this shape and for being soft in this beautiful space right now, I'm now shifting back into the discipline, back into the habits of consistent exercise, and bringing my kids along for the ride. I think the greatest gift that you can give to your kids is showing them, not just telling them, because they listen and learn from who you are, not what you say that or tell them to do all the time. So like it's you are the best example. And the number one indicator for a child's well-being is actually their mother's mental health. And so I have to look at what are the practices that I need to stay mentally uh, alert, and also mentally alert to like my feelings when I'm having a down day. And my kids will see me cry. They'll see me like break down on the floor and just have a good cry. And they'll also see me pick myself up, put to use my tools, probably go for a walk, and then come back and be like a totally different healed person. So I let them see everything. But the 4 points that I really always drill down to are having reverence for the moments, having reverence for the fact that I get to be on a podcast with you guys, like we get to have this great conversation, and then I get to go breastfeed my daughter and sit in a chair for another hour and just like enjoy her cuddles. And having reverence for the moments, to making sure I'm constantly questioning, am I telling myself the right story? If something's feeling hard, if something's feeling funky, I remind myself I have the power to choose, I have the power to change. And thus, because I have the power to choose and the power to change, like, is the story that I'm telling myself an accurate story? I had this happen just the other day with my husband, and I was like telling myself this really silly story of that wasn't true. It just wasn't true. As soon as I walked in and had a chance to talk with him, I said, "This is the story I've built up in my mind about what you were doing while you were watching the kids. Is this true?" And he's like, "No, that's not at all true. That's not accurate." But it was the story that I was telling myself. So I have to checking myself for, is this the right story? So often we can tell our stories about life or business or relationships of like, oh, the money's not coming in because of this, or oh, my team's not performing because of this. You don't know. You don't know unless you ask. So, and you don't know unless you look at all the data. And I guarantee you there's about 50,000 reasons why somebody doesn't buy your product or service. And probably only one of them is you. And it's like one of 50,000 other reasons. They could be life, it could be time, it could be all the things. So making sure you're telling yourself the right story. Number 3, I look at positivity. Like, am I showing up positive? Am I showing up joyful? And I don't look at it from a toxic positivity standpoint of like, I have to be smiling and great all the time. But am I looking forward? Am I looking for solutions? And just with reverence and telling myself the right story and having positivity and then having gratitude for the moment, those 4 are my daily practices.
I love that. So, for the listener who's in the middle of their own storm, whether it's loss, trauma, or a major life upheaval, what would you say to them right now about what's possible on the other side?
Okay. I have a question that I think will serve, but it also, if you're going through challenge, if you're going through your storm, if you're going through struggle, it also is a question that may make you want to punch me in the face. Do I have your permission to ask it?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Whatever it is that you're facing, and I mean whatever it is. I asked a client this 2 days after her father passed away, and it changed her life. I asked a client this after getting divorced and finding out that his wife had filed for divorce. I asked him this. how is this the best thing that ever happened to you? How is it the absolute best? Because there is always light with darkness. That is the paradox that we get to walk. And when we can look at, okay, well, there are so many other things on that other side. There are so many other things beyond into that unknown, but how can we create the absolute best outcome? How is this the best thing that ever happened for you? That's when we put ourselves as a creator of the next step. It is what it is. Whatever happened, happened. And the way to move forward in positive reverence, honoring the emotional breakdowns. Maybe it's the best thing for you because it actually allows you to feel your feelings and you've shut them down for years. And you actually finally get to have a little bit of feeling what it feels like to be human and not a robot and not this perfectionist automaton. Maybe this is the best thing for you because it actually frees you because that relationship was so toxic and such a nightmare. Maybe this is the best thing for you because it actually is going to allow you to be in a relationship with someone who wants to have a child. And you secretly deep down had ignored that dream, like my husband did. He didn't realize that he would be a dad. He became a dad, first time dad at 48. Now we have our third child at the age of 56. My husband is taking care of babies. Like, and yet he loves it. He loves it. But that was a dream he didn't think he'd ever get to have. And there are so many things. I mean, my husband can look back at his life and his past and his divorce, and he sees like the stuff that happened. Yeah, there's certain things that we'd prefer didn't happen in our lives, but those experiences, they equip you with a skill set, with learning, with intuitive knowledge, with a way of learning how to trust yourself and learning and your intuition and how to listen beyond just the words. There are experiences that when you walk through them, they just shape you into a different person. And it's hard shedding the skin and it's hard letting go of an old identity. And at the same time, when you let that go, and you ask yourself, how is this the best thing that happened for you, not to you, but for you, then look at who this experience is allowing you to create yourself to be.
Mm. I love that so much. I talk a lot about my best worst day when I got pushed over a balcony and ended up with a brain injury. And that changed my life. We moved into a shelter. I took an art therapy class and became an artist. And it was the worst day of my life, what I thought was the worst day of my life. But in all reality, if that day hadn't happened, I don't know that I would have traveled around the United States with my kids painting walls for the past 5 years, you know?
That's the coolest.
And so I'm extremely grateful for the best worst day of my life. Now, we always ask this question. The name of our podcast is In the Black, which is a financial term meaning being in the positive. Being in the red means being in the negative. So, in your own life, when you look at yourself now, what do you think of when you think of yourself being in the black?
Flow. Like in the black, I see cash flow. I see flow as in alignment flow. I see flow as in, and I think the thing that a lot of people mistake, and this is one that I mistake for a while, is that when things get rapidy or like you're hitting the rocks, that you're not still in flow. And actually, as someone who's done whitewater river rafting, like you're really in flow actually then. and so for me, I'm really in a season of flow in many ways with 3 kids and 2 businesses and soon a puppy because why not? But that experience of like, okay, I'm really in it and I'm allowing myself to like, I am in it and I'm in the whitewater and I'm finding the joy in being in the flow and being in the challenge of, okay, what do I get to figure out next? Like, what do I get to figure out next? Like, how do I navigate this? What can we juggle? What can we shift? What can we pivot? And then allowing myself that when I hit those moments where it's like, the rapids have passed, and get to enjoy that peace and that calm after the storm, that too is flow. It's not that it's an either or as far as what flow is. And it's sometimes flow is going to feel intense, but sometimes that's where the greatest pleasure can come from, are from those seasons of intensity when you look back and you're like, I am so proud of who I became through that.
Beautifully said. I just adore you, and I am so thankful that you did want to be a part of our podcast.
Of
Um,
course.
Yes, we definitely appreciate you coming on. I love your energy. I love what you have to say. I love that we're kind of sisters in our experiences throughout the years. And I just, I think that you are very, very powerful. And I love that you have transmuted your pain into power. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And it's what we're all about here at In the Black. So thank you so much for coming on here today.
You are so, so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute honor.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of In the Black. I hope today's story left you feeling inspired and reminded of the incredible strength that lies in each of us. Our guest today has taken her toughest challenges and transformed them into something beautiful, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way to find light in the world.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and share In the Black with another woman who could use a little encouragement. Together, we're building a community of passion, purpose, and power. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and remember, your story matters. Your choices change things, and being your most authentic self can and will change the world around you.